Hello and welcome everyone in another episode of Researcher Celebrity. Today we have Dr. Francisco Ferreira with us. A brief about his education and background. Dr. Francisco has done his bachelor's and master's in veterinary medicine, PhD in parasitology, and all the education was in Minas Gerais University in Brazil. Presently, he is a postdoc at Texas A&M University, and his basic research areas are in parasitic disease, infectious disease, vector-borne disease of reptiles, birds, and mammals. And he has done his research in Brazil, Japan, Lithuania, Hawaii, and presently at Texas A&M. With this brief introduction, I would like to welcome Dr. Ferreira at the stage.
Thank you so much, Raja. It's a pleasure to be here and talking to you today about science and research.
Oh, perfect. So, how we start our conversation is like how and when you decided that you wanted to be a researcher.
Yeah, so when and how is hard to trace back, but definitely when I was doing my veterinary studies, I was always interested in wildlife medicine and diseases and wildlife animal wildlife general conservation. And then because at that time everything was new, there was little research about most diseases that would affect birds, small mammals in captivity, and then everything that would kill them, it would be something new, right? A new parasite, new bacteria that were infecting them. And then everything was new. And then as I was progressing, I never thought about doing research most of my career.
Mm-hmm.
And then I wanted to actually to be like a zoo vet.
Mm-hmm.
And then I tried 2 residencies exams
Mm-hmm.
and in two zoos in Brazil,
Mm-hmm.
and I failed both the exams.
Mm-hmm.
So I wanted to be a zoo vet, and then I failed in those entry exams for residency.
Mm-hmm.
But then by the time when I failed the second one, which I did a good job at the exam, but I didn't pass, and then I already had the kind of passed the master's selection to
Mm-hmm.
join the vet school as a master's student as well, and then I went to research and then work in the lab.
Mm-hmm.
And before that I was already working as an undergrad in research labs.
Mm-hmm.
Then I was getting slowly into research, but it was
Mm-hmm.
something that I always had in my mind since I was a kid. I was
Mm-hmm.
always wanted to be working with exotic weird animals in the zoo or in the wild.
Mm-hmm.
And there was always since I grew up growing up, that was basically my my will and my desire to do.
Okay, so there are so many interesting things which can come out of this. The first one is, so when you do outdoor research, when you are not in the lab, working with animals, birds in the field, and when you are inside the laboratory doing all the downstream processing, do you feel that you are captive inside the laboratory?
Yeah, I think I am. Most of the time, sometimes it gets boring, but most of the time when I'm in the lab doing lab work, wet lab research and pipetting in small volumes,
Mm-hmm.
and even working with biological samples, dissecting mosquitoes, I still like it a lot.
Mm-hmm.
I kind of learned to like it. Yeah, I would say I'm still captivated. Of course, it's always exciting to be in the field, chasing animals, capturing animals,
Mm-hmm.
getting blood from animals.
Mm-hmm.
But I think I kind of like both,
Okay.
and I like changing between both
Mm-hmm.
often. So I don't like doing only lab work,
Mm-hmm.
but then I get tired to do only field work. So I kind of felt like navigating
Mm-hmm.
between those 2 aspects.
That's very important. So for all the audience and viewers here, this is very important to know that what kind of research do you like, because most of the people who are doing the literature research and all that, there is option for going out doing interviews and all. But if you are doing in biology, and especially if you like the field biology more than the lab, if you are not one of the researchers like him and who likes the both of them the best. So there is no demarcation that which one you prefer for the other one, but some things has been observed and noticed and coming up on our researcher celebrity conversations, that some people like to be more in lab because they are not interested or they don't want to be in the field, but the vice versa is also true for the researchers. And for a successful researcher and in super succeeding in the career, it is very important that you know the area which you like the most. Coming back, so when you said your bachelor's you wanted to be a vet in a zoo,
Mm-hmm.
then you ended up as a master student. Even when you were a master student, did you think of that you will do a PhD?
Not until the time when I was defending my master's thesis.
Mhm.
Because also in Brazil, the way it works, you go for the master's, a degree, and then you have to write down a thesis, and you have to do experiments. You do experiments, then you write down your thesis about them, and then you defend, right?
Mm-hmm.
And then when I defended, a professor that was in my defense committee, she said, yeah, no, maybe you could do some, you could do your work with me in my lab, some parasitology focus, now focusing, narrowing down to one disease or one pathogen I was investigating in my master's. So it was a broad master's, research, and then narrowing down to one pathogen or one disease system. And then that's how I went into PhD, because this professor, who I knew before, said, yeah, I think we could work together. And then she had like a fellowship already set up, and then I joined the PhD program in another school, another college.
So now let's talk about the journey of the PhD, because that is the most fascinating part in any researchers if they have done PhD. Because researcher, you can be a researcher without doing PhD also, but as you have done PhD, so if you would like to share the story or the journey, how it went.
Yeah, so when I started my PhD, I knew already my advisor, and I knew already the lab, and then we had a project which would be very interesting from my point of view, because I would investigate deeper the how sick these malaria parasites would make birds, and what happens when the bird get infected, and what are the clinical signs and all that. So that would take a lot of experimental work, and it was like a high risk project. And then we accepted that, and then I went down pursuing this project for a year. And then, of course, as many projects didn't work out as I expected. So after 1 year into my PhD, doing intense lab work and also intense field work, trying to get perfect samples in the field, and then we decided to give up on this project because it didn't work for many reasons. And then we had to think about other projects. So, and then it was 1 year, kind of course, not wasted year, because we learn a lot in this process. And I think failing and then not getting what you want in the first shot, it teaches you a lot. And then I learned a lot from that. And then, but I had to jump and find another project. And then we got this project, which was very exciting to work, also in Brazil. And then the great thing that came out of this new project, because it was via a collaboration with other universities. And then the great thing, I was going to do something kind of new to our field in Brazil and also globally. And then the great thing that came out of this, and then I went to a conference in Lithuania, and then I met a professor from Japan. Okay. And then he worked with mosquitoes, and he worked with vectors of this avian disease. And I said, hey, I may have a lot of samples to work, but and I would love to do that in your lab in Japan. So if I apply for a fellowship, can you host me? He said, yeah, fine, I can host you. We have funds, we have And then at the end of the day, I applied for this fellowship. I went to Japan to work with this professor, which was a fantastic, advisor. Very interesting way that he works, like how he organized his whole lab.
Mm-hmm.
He has like 30 students
Mm-hmm.
and no postdoc, no research assistant to help.
Mm-hmm.
So one professor running a lab with 30 undergrads and PhD students, and then it was fantastic to learn the Japanese culture of doing research, and then defending my thesis, it went well. At a certain degree, it went well.
Mm-hmm.
But then, of course, looking back, I think it was great that the first project didn't work,
Mm-hmm.
because I had to do these other interesting things. So I think what I learned is that we have all those bumps in the road,
Mm-hmm.
all those rocks to move from our way,
Mm-hmm.
and we always learn something. And then at the end of the day, if we have a good support from our advisors and a good support to keep doing science,
Mm-hmm.
we can always overcome those obstacles and and not succeed, but no, and then complete our goals and keep going into research, because
Mm-hmm.
this is pretty much what happens most of the time, right?
Absolutely.
It's never straightforward. It's never one shot and then it works fine the first time we try. It's always like that. And then life taught me that is not an exception to fail. It's almost like a rule most of the time. And then how to make those lemonades out of those lemons. That's how also I think a lot of research is about.
Absolutely. I think these are the points which everyone should think about before committing themselves for the PhD. And so now, your thoughts about choosing the advisor and the lab environment. How important is that before joining a lab for PhD?
Yeah, I think that's the main point we should think about before joining a PhD program. Knowing your future advisor is essential. I didn't get references from my professor, Dr. Erica Braga from Brazil, but because I was working in her lab for a few months before my PhD, so I knew how she worked, and I knew she was as a advisor. She was what I needed, because in my master's, my advisor, which was a fantastic professor, brilliant and then very lovely and kind person, he taught me how to be kind and how to be nice to people in doing research. But also, I am very unfocused person,
Mm-hmm.
and he was not the most focused as well.
Mm-hmm.
So I was exploring a lot, and then which was great.
Mm-hmm.
But then for my PhD, I needed a more like a bit more strict person,
Mm-hmm.
a person that would put me in line
Mm-hmm.
and keep me on the track.
Mm-hmm.
And then there was the person I say, yeah, I need this kind of guidance, because I can't go around running loose, doing research, and then, I need some focus in my life.
Mm-hmm.
And I remember when she was in my defense committee, she was the one that asked the toughest questions, and my family, they went there to watch, because in
Mhm.
Brazil we make a big
Mhm.
party out of defenses. All the
Mhm.
family goes. We have food and drinks before and after.
Mm-hmm.
And then my family, they didn't like her at all in the committee, because she was so tough, boom, boom, boom,
Mm-hmm.
hitting me really hard.
Mm-hmm.
And then I said, yeah, that's what I need. I need this kind of mentor to kind of put me,
Mhm.
on the track. And then so I knew her personal aspects. She was kind, she was nice, and but she would guide me in a
Mhm.
way that I felt that I needed.
This is another important part for all the people who are thinking that they want to do PhD. That knowing your strength is one thing, and knowing the capabilities, or at least guessing them, for your advisor and lab member is also something which you should keep in mind when considering to make a decision. Because what happens is, if you really want to be a researcher, as Francisco just mentioned, that he knew his strength and weakness, he know what kind of an advisor he wants, so that both of them get benefited. Francisco gets his PhD with flying colors, and the advisor have this opportunity to train a brilliant brain so that the research in all together gets benefited also. So Francisco, coming to the second point, that when the projects are not working, you said it's kind of a rule, yes, but when it does not work or it does not give you the desired output, how you coped with that and what you can suggest our young researchers that they should consider?
Yeah, that's a great question that I have to think a little bit about before answering. But the first thing, we should, we should maybe not, but we could always try. And knowing when to stop trying may be
Yes.
an important thing. You cannot try forever because resources are limited, time is limited, and you need to know when to stop and when to keep going.
Mhm.
Of course, no, as a young researcher, no, first year PhD, to me this limit wasn't clear at all.
Mhm.
And then that's when the advisor comes in and say, okay, we can keep trying. You are on track, so let's keep trying. I think you get it. But then there is a limit, right?
Mhm.
There's a biological limit because my
True.
limit was also biological.
Mhm.
Not my biology, but no, the parasites and the
Yes.
birds' biology.
Mhm.
And then which, because it's a non-model system, you don't know what happens and what works and what doesn't work.
True.
It's very exploratory at the beginning because a wildlife disease very always some is a non-model, so it's hard
Mhm.
to know. And then I think that the advisor has to kind of guide you on that way, so
Mhm.
you can keep trying until you have one, because in Brazil it's very fixed. We have 4 years for a PhD.
Mhm.
So yeah, 1 year, okay. Now I think we can start thinking about a plan B.
Mhm.
And then for a few months I was thinking of plan B, but trying to make plan A works.
Mhm.
And then you kind of go with both,
Mhm.
and then you leave the plan A behind and keep going with the plan B.
Perfect.
So that's how more or less it worked in my way. But
Mhm.
to me, it wasn't clear, very blurry,
Mhm.
and to know when to stop but also I wasn't attached to my project. I say I wanted to do that, but I'm fine. We trying something new, which also as a researcher, I think we already filter, right? We are mostly curious and excited about new projects that can even be a curse, right?
Mhm.
Because you're excited about so many things that you can now jump around into different projects without finishing yours. But
Mhm.
and then I was also excited with the possibilities of trying this something totally new that I never thought I was gonna do
Mhm.
before. It was not it was not even in my in my plan. So there also one thing, the kind of failure also is never great, but also the possibility of doing something very new also kept me interested and okay, let's do that now. Let's
Mhm.
give up on the plan A and then try plan B.
This is like something which we always talk at Researcher Celebrity, that
Mm-hmm.
never marry an idea. And as you mentioned, that you were never committed to that idea because you were like, okay, if this works, I'll continue this. If this doesn't, that flexibility of being a researcher is very important, because you should know. Now you are obviously way mature than what you were in your first year PhD. Now you know that you can decide for yourself. At that time, the advisor was the one who took that decision that, okay, now you should move to plan B. And then there was, as you mentioned, that there was a perfect blend of both of the plan A and B for some time. And then you just left A and just succeeded with the B, which is very important, because at the end of the day, for a PhD student, either it be number of years if it is limited by funding, or even if it is not limited by funding, one thing which is more important is PhD is just start of research. It's not the end of research. So the sooner you finish it, the more you will be able to flourish either in the same institution or moving abroad, opening your horizons, because that's what we have seen in case of Francisco. He has done research in 4 different countries. And speaking of which, now we will come to about the importance of conference and meetings, because you mentioned your mentor from Japan. You met in a conference or a meeting where you got
Mhm.
this offer. what you suggest to our viewers, that how should they prepare themselves before attending a international conference or a meeting or another scientific meeting or group meeting?
Yeah, no. First of all, no, going abroad for a meeting is a luxury. Fortunately, in Brazil at that time, we were going through like a nice wave of some funding to do research. So we were at the historical peak for funding for research.
Mm-hmm.
So, but before that, and then a bit after that, the money went down a little bit. So it was harder. So the first thing, of course, not everybody will be able to go to international conferences, but no, I no most of the time I think we should put some effort to, let's say, in a PhD, try to go to at least one conference, which is what I did. Now, one international conference, try to get funds. If not, I also had to pay from some of my own personal money to go. I got some funding to go, but it wouldn't cover everything. And then, I had some, small savings to go, but also it was important for me, right? And I think going to those conferences and being curious and not being shy,
Mm-hmm.
I think, and talking to other researchers, we always think, oh, those guys that I read their papers, they all not nice people, and they are not friendly. But sometimes, surprisingly, a lot of them can be very friendly and open to hear to people.
Mm-hmm.
And also presenting some research is a nice way to start these conversations.
Mm-hmm.
In a poster section, for example, is important to try to get some data and go to those conferences and be open-minded and explore a lot.
Mm-hmm.
Listening to the talks is very important. To those talks are very important, uh, of course. But no, I think the conferences is more for networking and try
Yes.
to meet people. Hearing and learning about things is important. You can always read a paper before or after that,
Mm-hmm.
but the networking is important. So try to speak with the people, interact, and do not be shy.
Mm-hmm.
Of course, language can be a barrier.
Mm-hmm.
Sometimes not everybody has the opportunity to learn a language when they are as an undergrad or grad school can also be a limitation. But in the conference, whenever you go, it's very. I've seen many times people are willing, and they want to listen to you. They take their time. Okay, you don't speak French, but we can work it out. We can
Mm-hmm.
talk slowly and then having some breaks. Also, I think in conferences, what also I think is very important is those off-conference
Mm-hmm.
part, like going for a banquet if there is one, and going to have a beer with the
Mhm.
speakers, going to have coffee with the speakers or with a group.
Mm-hmm.
Go to the conference. If you go alone, it's a bit harder, but no, if you go in groups, don't stick to your
Yes.
buddies from your country.
Mm-hmm.
Try to moving around in groups is easier, so you can go with your friends and exploring. But I guess and asking for possible. Okay, I'm finishing my masters now.
Mm-hmm.
Do you have a fellowship for a PhD? Can we
Mhm.
apply for one together?
Mm-hmm.
I really like our research.
Mm-hmm.
Do your homework, right?
Mhm.
If these people gonna be in the conference, you know about them. Read one or two papers that they just published, and they say, hey, I saw this paper. I like this area. And of course, always be true to yourself and to the person.
Mm-hmm.
You don't want to fool yourself. Also, pretend you want to do something when you do not want, because you don't want to commit to a 4-year journey with something you don't truly like and love.
Absolutely. No, I think these are very important key points which everyone should think about at any stage of your career. What Francisco just mentioned is like, don't be shy. That is the universal rule. If you are going for abroad or for any other scientific meeting, one thing which is for sure is that you have your data. So that's there when you are in your lab also. What additional you can get out of it, going, listening to talks, not only sticking to your research interest, because sometimes the best ideas you can get is from a totally different field, a totally different person out of your research focus, research interest, and then you're like, I can do this. And these are the ways which gets a lot of benefit from, because when people start coming together and doing the interdisciplinary research, which is booming these days, this is how it comes, because people from different research questions come together and then they start working towards the same. Second net part is like networking, obviously, is you are going and talking, but Francisco also mentioned that don't be shy asking fellowships. If you are a master student, for PhD, if you are a PhD student, for postdoc, if you are a postdoc, then about the opportunities of being early career fellow or faculties, because people are there to network, people are there to talk. And as Francisco also correctly mentioned, that sometimes we are we are a follower of a research group of a PI who's a very, very big name, and we think that they might not entertain us. Surprisingly, sometimes they give you the best, response. They admire you and then they let you explain your words instead of fairly, new faculties, because they have too much on their plate. They might not have time because they are there for their networking. So you have to open your own thoughts, which are limiting you, because nothing else can limit you except your own thoughts. So, Francisco, coming on the topic of when you are doing a research in absence of a model organism, because if you have a model organism for your biological question, it is easy because you have a certain database or a baseline experiments information available to you. But when you do your research with a non-model organism, then you have to, so one constraint, that you have to do whatever is available. How was that experience in your case, and what you can suggest the other budding or young enthusiastic researchers who think that they can do everything?
Yeah, so the first thing, I didn't have a lot of training, on working with model organisms. So for me, there was not even a thing. To me, all my research had always been like, okay, let's know we have these animals in a zoo. They are dying from whatever disease. Let's investigate this disease. Let's collect samples and do some first exploratory analysis and see what's killing them. Okay, now you know what's killing them. So now let's see how we can prevent this from happening. So, and then that was one part of my research. So there was no experimental manipulations happening. And then for my PhD also, I did very into the field, collecting samples from the field, analyzing the lab, and then testing differences in parasite community, and then what makes, if you have one group of birds in this kind of environment, what are the parasites they are exposed to against to here, which are more pristine forests. So it had always been like that. So I never had the thought about, okay, let's work on this cloned mice, or the clonal lines of cells, or this kind of research. It had it's never been on my radar. But and then the good thing out of it is that you kind of learn a bit more how to deal with failure, like we mentioned, and also you kind of don't get attached to your lines, and then don't get attached to your project, and then you can move more easily if there's a non-model. So, and then for experimental reasons in the lab, it gives some problems because it depends on samples coming in, depend on that exact time when you're working. You're gonna to the field to get some samples. You need to be you can be lucky and get it the first try. It also can be unlucky and never get it. So that's also one. And how to cope with that? That was a question, right?
Yes.
I don't know if I can answer to that specifically. I guess open up a little bit broader your target, your interest. Let's say you're working, okay, you want to do a specific bacterium infecting mice.
Mhm.
Okay, so now this bacterium is not here, so why not getting a protozoan infecting the same mouse population?
Mhm.
And then you can now open a bit broader your interest, and then you can kind of answer the question, using a different organisms, something
Mhm.
like that. I don't know if I answer
No, I
well.
think this is very important. Like as you mentioned this couple of times, that not don't be attached to the idea. So if you think that something is not working, you always keep your mind open and then move to the next point and then start, you know, putting your efforts into.
Mhm.
Because at the end of the day, being a researcher, you need publication. You need your experiments to get working, and especially in case of you when you are working with these time sensitive issues, that okay, if in zoo something is happening, then you don't have this leverage that you take a number of years to answer it, because it is just like you need the solution that same, like within a couple of days, to prevent that mortality. So how tough was that working in that situation?
Yeah. So also to work on the situation, sometimes though you have a very particular question and a very particular problem, which not many agencies are willing to fund,
Mm-hmm.
and not many journals are willing to publish your findings. So the way to go around that is also working under like a broader project umbrella.
Mm-hmm.
For example, the beginning, my advisor in Brazil, she was working with human malaria,
Mm-hmm.
which is a big problem in many tropical countries, right,
Yes.
including Brazil included. So she had money to do human malaria, and she had and then she was getting people coming to her to work on avian malaria, birds parasites, and then she didn't have the funds for bird parasite, but she had some money from the human malaria project, and she could now easily pay some money and move some money around because they were not restricted to the human malaria stuff. So
Mm-hmm.
she could go get this money first and start exploring some non-human malaria projects,
Mm-hmm.
and then building this career slowly,
Mm-hmm.
and then now you have enough data, you have enough publication,
Mm-hmm.
and now you can come back and propose and write a research grant or
Yeah.
a research project and then submit it.
Mm-hmm.
So that's one way of going, and also finding collaborations. I think is very important. Again, networking, but now outside uh, meetings. So
Mm-hmm.
you just email people, say, hey, I have this problem. I need some. No, I've seen your papers about it. I know you have a lab capacities. You may have some reagents, some
Mm-hmm.
consumables, and then so are you willing to get my samples and then process them,
Mm-hmm.
and then we can work on that together. So also finding collaborations and reaching out to people, I think, is also a good way to start and a good way to circumvent those problems.
Oh, absolutely. I think the point here, this is probably of particular interest to the young faculties. When you don't have a lot of fundings, in most of the cases, there are some young fellows who have all the money in the world. So getting funding, as Francisco said, from the publications, you can always have multiple projects. Main one is what you are mainly funded for. But then when you start doing small projects, when you have enough of data with your publication, because whenever you are submitting a grant, the referees, what they see is your expertise in the field and your experience in the field. If you are totally naive, have a brilliant idea, and you are asking for a big amount of money, they always will be spectacle, and you and me, even anyone in the world will be more skeptical about it, that why do we give fund to you who have zero experience in the field, instead of a person who have experience of more than decades, giving the same fund for them. So you have to always keep this in mind, that getting funding, getting publication for the funding, this is a vicious cycle. This never gets over, and that is one of the part when some of the researchers are not very appreciative of, because you write, you publish, you write another grant, you publish the out of that, and then this is just goes on and on and on. So this is something which is for probably people to decide for themselves that they enjoy academic research better than industrial research, or they enjoy their research the way it is instead without putting any tag onto it. So these are the things which we discussed. Francisco, how do you see yourself as a researcher in future?
Yeah, another not difficult question, but yeah, I really like doing research. I also like talking about research. I like talking about and I also like talking and interacting with people. I like being in classes. So for me, my my golden dream would be like do research and teaching and outreach, all these components somewhere. Now as a mid-stage scientist, a researcher, I still thinking and looking for possibilities. But yeah, I would like to to have my own lab, and but not necessarily. I also would be happy to working with different groups. As long as I can do my research. If I can pay my bills, I don't really need to have my own lab and my own career or my own um, research group. I would be happy also being involved into and being a kind of an important part of other groups. Also, teaching is one thing I really would like to spend more time with, and be always stay in touch with students and younger people, because you always learn a lot from them.
Yes.
And you also need to keeping in mind what's happening in the real world. And I think talking to the students and have this interaction in the class also is important, also to guide our research and to direct our research at some point. But yeah, but I don't know where I will be in the near future, where and doing what. But sometimes this idea of not knowing where I'm gonna be in 1 year from now, sometimes it seems scary, but I think I'm already getting used to it. And thinking about moving around between jobs and all that. But it also excites me at some point. So I'm still a little bit exploring to know where I'm going to establish in the U.S., in Brazil, or somewhere else, if I can find a nice place to work at.
But one thing is for sure, that you wanted to be a researcher always.
Yeah, ideally yes. But of course, no, I'm not attached to my projects, but also I wouldn't be attached to be a researcher. If I can navigate, I can change my focus and my interest. Fine, sometimes it can even be a blessing, of course.
Yes.
I can be focused and unfocused at the same time. But yeah, but of course, being happy and having meaningful relationships. I think that's what matters to me most of the time.
Oh yeah, absolutely. And I think at the end of the day, when we label ourselves as researcher or not, but one thing which is true for everyone is, like, at the end of the day, we are human beings. And if you are happy, doesn't matter what you are doing, where you are, what you have done, and what were the dreams. The only thing which matters is your happiness. And so there are so many blocks around, when it comes to researchers' happiness and thing. And Empowering Science Foundation is the one which believe in breaking the barriers. And one of the barrier for researcher is, like, they cannot be celebrities. Like, mostly they are not celebrities.
Yeah.
And with this series, when we have these conversations with our researchers, so we always say that researcher celebrity is celebrating research. So today, you can go and say that, okay, you are a celebrity. Okay, people can contact you, and this is something which we always tell our audience and viewers, that if they want to write it to you directly, to with some specific questions, your guidance, that how they should do certain things or approach, with your permission, can I say that, okay, they can write it to you directly?
Sure, yeah, more than happy to to talk to people about any component, personal life, professional life. Of course, no, I may not be the best guidance for many aspects of life, but no, if I can be of help, yeah, that's my pleasure and my interest of doing. So yeah, for sure.
Thank you.
Please.
Thank you very much, Francisco, for the time and sharing this journey. And for all the viewers, stay tuned for another episode of Researcher Celebrity. For today, we'll say thank you very much, Francisco. Once
Thank you,
again.
Raja. Nice, great talking to you.
Yeah, it's a
Fantastic.
pleasure having you. Thank you.
Cool.